The small house at the end of Rose Street stood quietly, just like it had for more than 40 years. Its paint had faded, the wooden gate creaked when the wind touched it, and the tiny garden in front was no longer full of bright flowers. Only a few weak roses still bloomed, stubbornly holding on to life. Inside this house lived Mary Thompson, a 72-year-old widow whom everyone in the neighborhood called the Forgotten Mother, though never to her face. Every morning, Mary woke up before sunrise. Her routine never changed. She washed her face with cold water, brushed her gray hair neatly, and put on a clean but old dress. Then she slowly walked into the kitchen and prepared a simple breakfast for herself, usually tea and a slice of bread. But even though she ate alone, she always set 3 plates on the small wooden table. One plate was for her son Daniel. Another was for her daughter Emma. The third was for herself. Mary knew her children were not coming. Deep inside her heart, she knew it very well. Daniel lived in another city with his wife and children. Emma had moved abroad years ago after marriage. Months passed, then years. Still, Mary kept setting those plates. After breakfast, Mary walked to the front door and opened it gently, as if she were afraid to wake someone. She stepped outside and looked down the empty street. Every single day, she hoped to see a familiar face walking toward her house. Sometimes she imagined Daniel's tall figure or Emma's long hair moving in the wind. When she saw strangers passing by, her heart quietly fell back into sadness. She would sit on the old wooden chair near the door and wait. Neighbors often saw her there, sitting silently with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road. Some people felt sorry for her but did not know what to say. Others simply walked past, busy with their own lives. Mary's husband, John, had died 10 years ago. After his death, her children promised they would visit her often. At first, they did. They came during holidays, birthdays, and sometimes just for a weekend. The house was full of laughter back then. Mary cooked their favorite meals. The walls echoed with memories of a happy family. But slowly, visits became rare. Daniel became busy with work. Emma had her own family problems. Phone calls turned into short messages. Messages turned into silence. Mary never complained. Whenever she talked to her children on the phone, she always said the same thing. "I'm fine, my dear. Don't worry about me. Take care of yourselves." And she truly meant it. She did not want to be a burden. She did not want them to feel guilty. But loneliness is a quiet pain. It does not shout. It slowly fills the empty spaces in the heart. Every afternoon, Mary walked to the nearby park. She liked to sit on a bench under a large oak tree. Families came there with their children. Couples laughed. Old friends talked happily. Mary watched them with a soft smile, but her eyes often became wet. She remembered how she once came to this same park holding Daniel's small hand while Emma ran ahead, laughing loudly. She remembered their childhood, their school days, their first heartbreaks, their dreams. She remembered everything, except the sound of her house filled with their voices. One evening, as Mary returned home from the park, she found a letter in her mailbox. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. For a moment, she thought it might be from one of her children. But it was just a bill. She sighed deeply and walked inside. The house felt colder than usual. She heated some soup and ate alone again. After dinner, she sat on the sofa and looked at the family photo on the wall. It showed John standing behind her, his hands on her shoulders. Daniel and Emma stood in front, smiling brightly. Mary touched the photo gently. "I did my best," she whispered. "Didn't I?" That night, she dreamed that her children came home. They hugged her tightly. They laughed. They told her they were sorry. When she woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Mary's health slowly became weak. Her legs hurt when she walked. Her hands shook more often. But she never told her children. She did not want to worry them. One rainy afternoon, Mary slipped in the kitchen and fell. The pain in her hip was sharp. She lay on the floor for hours, unable to stand. Finally, she managed to crawl to the phone and called a neighbor for help. She was taken to the hospital. While lying on the hospital bed, Mary looked at the door again and again. She hoped to see Daniel or Emma walk in. No one came. The doctor asked her, "Should I call your family?" Mary smiled weakly and said, "They are very busy." After 3 days, Mary was discharged. A nurse helped her into a taxi. When she reached home, the house welcomed her with silence. She walked slowly to her bedroom and lay down. That night, Mary felt something heavy in her chest. Her breathing became difficult. She held her chest with trembling hands and whispered her children's names. Daniel, Emma. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her heart finally grew too tired to keep waiting. The next morning, a neighbor found Mary lying peacefully on her bed. Her eyes were closed. A gentle smile was on her face. On the table beside her bed were 3 plates, clean and neatly placed. 2 days later, Daniel and Emma arrived at the house after receiving the news. They stood in the doorway, shocked by how quiet and empty the house felt. Emma picked up one of the plates from the table. "Why are there 3 plates?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at the dusty photo frame and the old chair near the door. He understood. Tears filled his eyes. "She was waiting for us," he whispered. For the first time in years, the house heard the sound of their crying. But the forgotten mother was no longer there to hear their voices. The house on Rose Street had never felt so heavy with silence. After Mary Thompson's funeral, Daniel and Emma stayed behind while the neighbors slowly returned to their own homes. The soft sound of rain tapped against the windows, and the sky outside looked as gray as their hearts. They stood in the living room, not knowing what to do or where to begin. Emma walked toward the old wooden chair near the front door. She touched its worn armrest and whispered, "She used to sit here every day, didn't she?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Waiting for us." The words felt like knives in his chest. They began to walk through the house, room by room. Everything was exactly as their mother had left it. The kitchen smelled faintly of tea. 3 plates were still neatly placed on the table. In the bedroom, her bed was perfectly made, and her slippers rested beside it. Emma picked up one slipper and held it close to her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I should have come," she cried softly. "I should have come more often." Daniel sat down heavily on the sofa. He covered his face with his hands. "We both should have," he said. "We kept saying, next month, next year, when things calm down. But life never calms down. It only moves forward." They found a small wooden box in Mary's drawer. Inside it were letters, all written in her neat handwriting. Each envelope had a date. Most of them were never sent. Emma opened the first letter and began to read out loud. "My dear Daniel and Emma. Today I made your favorite soup. I remembered how you used to fight over the last bowl. I laughed alone at the table. I hope you are healthy and happy. That is all I wish for." Emma's voice broke. Daniel picked up another letter. "I watched children playing in the park today. It reminded me of you both. I miss your laughter. But don't worry about me. I am fine." They read letter after letter. Mary had written to them almost every week. She never complained. She never blamed them. She only spoke about her love, her memories, and her hope to see them again. Emma dropped the letters and fell to her knees. She was lonely, she cried. And we left her alone. Daniel's chest felt tight. He remembered the last time his mother had called him. He had been busy in a meeting and rejected the call. He never called back. "She must have thought we didn't care," he whispered. That night, Daniel and Emma stayed in their mother's house. The silence felt louder than any noise. Emma lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. "I used to feel so safe here," she said quietly. "Now it feels empty." Daniel stood near the window, looking at the dark street. "She waited for us until her last breath," he said. "How do we live with that?" The next morning, they decided to visit the park where Mary used to go every afternoon. They sat on the same bench under the oak tree. Families passed by. Children laughed. Life went on. Emma watched an old woman walking slowly with a cane. "That could have been her," she said. Daniel closed his eyes. "I kept telling myself she was strong," he said. "I told myself she didn't need me anymore." They sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of their regret. Later that day, they visited Mary's neighbor, Mrs. Collins, the woman who had found Mary. "She talked about you both every day," Mrs. Collins said gently. She was proud of you. She never said a bad word about either of you. Emma's tears returned. She deserved better children, she whispered. Mrs. Collins shook her head. No, she loved you. That was enough for her. But it was not enough for Daniel and Emma. They returned to the house and began cleaning. As they wiped dust from the shelves and folded old clothes, memories filled every corner. Daniel found his old school notebook. Emma found her childhood drawings. Their mother had kept everything. She never stopped being our mother, Emma said. Even when we stopped being her children. That night, Daniel dreamed of his mother again. She stood in the kitchen, smiling softly. Don't cry, my son, she said. I know you loved me. Daniel woke up with tears on his face. The next day, Daniel and Emma made a decision. They donated Mary's clothes to the poor. They gave her furniture to families who needed it. But they kept the house. We won't sell it, Emma said. This is our mother's home. They turned the small house into a place for lonely elderly people in the neighborhood. Every Sunday, they invited old men and women to come for tea, food, and conversation. On the wall, they placed Mary's photo. This is for her, Daniel said. Months passed. Daniel started visiting his own children more often. Emma called her father-in-law every day. They both learned the same painful lesson too late. Time is the only thing you can never get back. One quiet evening, after serving tea to the elderly visitors, Emma stood in front of her mother's photo. I'm sorry, Mama, she whispered. We understand now. Daniel stood beside her. We will never forget you, he said. And we will never forget what we did wrong. Outside, the roses in the garden had started to bloom again. And for the first time since Mary's death, the house on Rose Street was no longer silent.